everyone. Welcome to the Storyist. In today's episode, find out how one of Manuel's clients and his supposed to be normal day-to-day at work changed his life. Most of the employee or laborer's life revolves around the same routine every day. We are so used to doing the same things that we barely look forward to something nice that comes along the way. Waking up in the morning, preparing for work, grinding till the sun sets, and coming back to our house. Manuel's life is no different. He is one of the plumbers in their small town who provides service to his neighbors and clients in exchange for some money. That is just enough for him and his family to survive their everyday life. He has a lovely wife and a 7-year-old boy, whom he sends to a public school nearby. One of Manuel's biggest dreams is for his son to finish his studies, a dream which he wasn't able to achieve because of poverty. Manuel had a rough childhood. His mother died giving birth to him, and his dad, who was also a known plumber in town, passed away several years ago due to a chronic illness. Manuel learned his plumbing skills from his dad. His father isn't the smartest guy in the world, but he did make sure that Manuel will grow up to be a good and skillful person. Manuel grew up to be a shy but very observant boy. His father, who works full-time as a plumber, used to bring him to his client's house because he had no one to leave him to. Manuel would usually sit in a corner and watch his dad as he repaired leaking pipes, installed fixtures and faucets, and many other things a plumber usually does. When his father died, it had been a tougher time for Manuel. He didn't know where to start. He was mad, and he felt as if the world was against him. First, he never met his mother, nor did he have any memories of him. And now that his father's gone too, he had nowhere to go. Manuel was in grief for months. He lost a lot of weight and had been depressed. But everything changed when he married his childhood friend Laura. Laura was there for Manuel the whole time when he was in a miserable situation and was grieving his father's death. Later on, they had been lovers and decided to tie the knot and have a child. Manuel, who chose to be a plumber just like his dad, had been receiving clients and had been doing his plumbing services for years now after he had a family. It had been his family's main source of income. Although he's not getting so many clients and the pay wasn't that good, he thought that this would be a great way for him to put food on the table and send his son to school. One morning, Manuel got a call from an old lady asking for his help to unclog a drain. She introduced herself as Mrs. Edmund. She gave detailed instructions to Manuel on how to get inside the village and the house, as she wouldn't be home until 5 p.m. Manuel carefully wrote the instructions, got dressed, and went to the address that afternoon. Manuel was familiar with the place. It was a known village where rich people lived. He rode a bus on his way and followed the directions. It didn't take him long to find it. Once he reached the entrance of the subdivision, he left an identification card as instructed by her client. She said that it was the protocol for visitors like him. It was the first time Manuel had the chance to enter this village. While he was walking, he was amused by the houses he had passed by. All the houses were big and beautiful. It wasn't like any of the houses he had seen before. The village itself was enormous and overwhelming. Afraid to get lost, he looked at his notes where it said, "A large white painted house with a huge garage, a mailbox on the side, with Edmund's residence imprinted on the gate." "I'm here," Manuel uttered to himself. Manuel had entered the house using a temporary lockbox combination the owner had provided him. The entire house was surrounded by security cameras as he was expecting. He proceeded to the entrance. Its interior was like those mansions he sees on television. Manuel glanced at the entirety of the large house he's now stepping in. Just as he was about to proceed to the kitchen, where his work was needed, he noticed something in the living area that shocked him. He went close to it, examined every detail of it, and he's convinced that he couldn't be wrong. It was a photo of himself. Just when he thought that it would just be a normal day for him, it had begun getting crazy. Why would the owner of the house hang a photo of him? Did the owner know him? Was it possible that it was just a guy with a very strong resemblance to him? Manuel had so many questions. After almost half an hour, still overwhelmed by the emotions he was feeling, Manuel still chose to do what he went there for. He'd finished the job and he'd asked that question that's been bothering him to the owner once she got home. He started preparing his dad's old tools and took a look at the clogged drain. It didn't take him long enough to examine where the clog was coming from and the steps he needed to do to fix it. An hour had passed, and Manuel was almost finished doing his work when he suddenly heard the gate open. For some reason, he was nervous and he didn't know what to do. He heard the door and the approaching footsteps. Still, Manuel did not have the courage to stand or even look at the person who was now behind him. "Great work, you're almost done," said the old lady, whom Manuel assumed was Mrs. Edmund. Manuel, who's still finishing his work, dared to stand up and look at the old lady's face, and the old lady was as shocked as he was. The old lady's eyes widened, and a few moments later, she was crying, which made Manuel much more confused. Manuel asked the lady about what was happening, and what was the photo of him in the living area all about. "It was my son," said Mrs. Edmonds. "He was a soldier, and he died during the war 3 years ago." It didn't make sense to Manuel. Still, he was confused why they looked alike. Mrs. Edmonds explained to him that the man on the frame was his adopted son. 30 years ago, there came a man knocking on their door with 2 babies in his hands. The man, who was a widower, was begging for them to get the other child as it was so sickly and he didn't have enough money. Mrs. Edmonds thought it was some kind of blessing, as she and her husband had been trying to have their own child for years, but they hadn't been lucky. They took care of Chris, Manuel's twin brother, and treated him like their own until his life was taken away from him. After Mrs. Edmonds saw Manuel's face, she thought for a second that it might be his son, Chris, but that would be too impossible because he's dead. It suddenly came to her that Chris had a twin, who could possibly be the man who's standing in front of him inside his house. Manuel was shocked by everything he just heard. It couldn't be happening. Everything was just too fast and coincidental for him. Still confused, he sat and tried to absorb all the information he just heard. The old lady kept on narrating about his twin brother's life, and how good of a person he was. Michael couldn't seem to fathom what she was saying. He got mixed emotions. He was happy that he had a twin, but sad that he hadn't seen him alive. At the same time, he was mad at his father. How could he not let him know? Maybe because all their lives, they had been poor and his dad wouldn't be able to feed them both. Did his dad ever think of Chris sometimes? Or was he content knowing that Chris lived a life far away from theirs? Manuel was annoyed by the thought that no one could answer his questions but his dad, who was no longer around. After contemplating, Manuel bid goodbye to the old lady. He thanked her for loving and taking care of his brother. The old lady insisted that Manuel and his family visit her and her husband sometime. She said Chris was their son, and Manuel is now a family too. Manuel told the story to her family, and they were surprised as he was. They finally decided to visit the old couple every weekend. They began spending more hours together, and the old couple promised to help with Manuel's son's studies. Manuel's life had been better not just because of the financial aid the couple offered to them, but because he felt like he had found new people to treasure in his life. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed that video, and we'll see you on the next. Stay tuned.